Welcome to the Teamwork Advantage podcast with Greg Gregory. Join us as Greg interviews powerful thought leaders and successful team and leadership experts from across the country on teamwork, leadership, and organizational culture. Now let's check in for this week's episode.
Welcome to the Teamwork Advantage. I'm your host, Greg Gregory, where we help people understand the power of teamwork, leadership, and organizational culture. This week, we're privileged to have with us a gentleman that I've had the honor of knowing for about 5 or 6 years now, Ric Mims. And he's got more than 25 years worth of experience working in the service desk management area in the IT side of things. We met through a conference at HDI several years ago. Over the years, Ric's had a number of leadership positions, from enterprise service desk manager to manager of VP of operations for global outsourced provider. He's also served in many capacities with the HDI organization as the former president of Connecticut chapter, board member of the global training faculty, and HDI strategic service board that designed and authored the standards for IT service and support industry. Ric and I did meet at one of these HDI conferences several years ago, and we also quickly found out that we were both at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, at the same time on the opposite sides of campus. It really is a small world when you start to look at that. Today, Ric's moved on through film career, the United States military and the Army. We're going to talk about that. He's also works currently as a ServiceNow practice director for the Precision Task Group, headquartered in Houston, Texas. So joining us in Houston today, ladies and gentlemen, Ric Mims. Welcome, Ric.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
I'm great. I'm excited to have you joining us here on the Teamwork Advantage. There's a lot of folks that we have listening from all aspects of life. And working in a COVID environment today, of course, one of the challenges, everybody's working from home. So I'm assuming that everybody's having IT problems somewhere along the board. So I appreciate the time that you're able to carve out for us today.
Sure.
It's more than just IT for you, though. It's customer service.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit. Let's go back pre-COVID, okay, before February of 2020, and go back 5 years from that. How have things changed in that period? And then let's look at it from since February up until present moment. How have things changed with COVID?
Well, Greg, it's interestingly enough, when you look at providing solutions to a client, I've been, I guess I want to be careful in the way I would say this. I've been a service management consultant for many years now. And so I've had the pleasure of traveling from client to client organization to really feel what they're looking for, to feel what their problems are, to see what the areas of customer engagement is like for these organizations. You'll find that pre-COVID, that organizations in this country were still trying to figure out who they are with the advent of Idle 4 now, really bringing about, talking about value streams and all of that. And I think it was somewhat, in my mind, confusing in some aspects. I think most of the world right now is still operating off of ITIL version 3, which is a little more palatable, easier to understand. And the way many of the systems.
Let's do a little time out here. Let's make sure that we're talking about some language that a lot of folks are going to understand. They may not understand the ITIL concepts and some of that.
Sure. ITIL, the acronym for IT Infrastructure Library, is a set of recommended best practices from the best way of doing business, without getting too detailed with this.
Right.
So it makes a set of recommendations, a set of best practice books out there that gives guidance to strategic as well as tactical leaders, so that they can really understand what their business process outcomes are really all about. Makes recommendations for what should be measured and those types of things. So moving forward, the entire piece of this is where I've gone into client organizations, and I've taken a hard look at their business process maturity, for example. It amazes me where the widening gap, and our dear friend Roy Atkinson, who is one of our great industry gurus in this industry, and a wonderful person all the way around.
Absolutely.
He and I had a conversation recently about the ever widening gap that exists between what the publishers in the various industry magazines say where we should be versus what's actual reality in these organizations. So as these things begin to continue to grow and evolve, we have to really work harder to adopt and adapt to business best practice, take those pieces, really begin to modify them as needed within our own organizations to really begin to understand what it is we want in the way of overall business outcomes.
Because let's face it, customer service in IT is going to be one area, whether we're working internally or externally could be slightly different and handled that way. Right. So there is not necessarily one specific aspect of it, is there?
No, there's not one specific aspect at all. Even today, one of the things that that is happening is you'll find that, and let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a 30-second step back in the industry. Back in the day when I was one of the faculty members on the with HDI, one of the things that we used to always talk about is aligning IT with the business. We used to always talk about that, aligning IT with that of the business. If you're not aligned with the business, then you're not doing what you're supposed to do, in a nutshell. However, in order to align ourselves better with the business, we had to come up with a way to really understand what are some of the processes that we need to execute on better, more efficiently, gain effectiveness in everything that we do. COVID has brought that, has kind of almost in a lot of ways changed the entire industry as we see it today. We had to address a remote workforce. We had to find ways to physically develop or deliver our services to our customers. How do we onboard? If you think about something as simple as onboarding an employee during this COVID time, incredible effort to be able to do that. So yeah, COVID has really changed a lot of the perspectives that we knew in our former normal, as I would call it.
Right.
Now we have a different world, and we have to certainly be ready to address those things.
Right, and there's the key factor, because when you start talking about onboarding, and all the processes in the world are great, but they're almost useless without the right people working the right tasks.
Yes, now, and even with the tasks, then comes, okay, we figured out what the tasks are going to be. Fantastic. We know from the time a request comes in, from that manager, yeah, I've got a new employee. They're going to start on Monday, but they're not starting on Monday in the office. They may be starting, your company may be in Phoenix, Arizona. This new employee may be in Philadelphia. Then comes the timeliness and effectiveness of that process. In order for that individual to start work on Monday, when does this process actually have to be executed upon for the timeliness for that employee to start on Monday in Philadelphia, right? Yeah.
And then how do we get them to communicate? I'm assuming that some companies are not just onboarding one person at a time now. They're still possibly onboarding, 3, 4, 10 people at a time. And especially with the changes that are going on.
Yeah.
So how has that impacted the teams within your organization today? How have you been able to get your teams to work together better to better serve the organizations that you guys serve and, of course, sell to?
Well, I think several things, Greg. I think one of the things that I do with my team, I meet with them not only to get the work done, but I also meet with them casually. I know this is going to sound cheesy as heck, but but first off, I have a great team. I have a great team of individuals who care, okay, which is that part of the battle I don't have to fight. They're mature, don't have to get them to work. But the other thing that I do is I still do more of a rewards conference call, if you will. This week, I want to recognize Mike or Andy for a job well done. Here was the problem statement. They took it on, took the ball and went right up the middle with it and got the customer well taken care of. Kudos to you. I even do things, we still do virtual happy hours type things. And, we just get together to keep that camaraderie where it needs to be, so that working from home, you can very much feel alone as a team member, believe me.
Oh, I mean, I've worked from home for over 20 years, except for when I get in an airplane and go to a client site.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it can be a daunting task. There's no doubt, especially for those who enjoy being around people.
And there's that aspect too that we're not thinking about, where I don't know that, in our so-called new normal, if we're actually going to see the use of office space the way it used to be. Many companies have found that employees have actually been more productive working from home, where 10 years ago, they used to say, no, we're not going to allow you to work from home because you won't be productive.
Right.
Well, the opposite we found to be true.
Yeah, I saw a study about that where a large percentage of people are actually more productive. What we've got to be careful about, and this is one of the questions about you, and you've already covered it, is that you're doing the virtual happy hours and you're still keeping the socialization parts in place. Because one of the greatest things with any team is they have this sense of belonging, that they belong to something bigger than who they are. And by working alone, all of a sudden, that's almost individual siloing if we're not careful.
Yeah. If you remember back to, let's go to pre-COVID once again, if you read some of the industry articles, it would talk about how the majority of your life was your job, because you had not only the job, you also had the social aspect of the job, hanging out with your coworkers by the water cooler in the break room, knowing and understanding, oh my God, Julie got pregnant. We're going to celebrate, and can we all chip in to buy her a cake, ice cream, and balloons? These types of things are what was key to actually helping to meld a successful team together, was everybody understanding and knowing and building and feeling of one accord. Now, that aspect of things has gone away, most certainly.
Right. Now, we all know that teamwork can actually come at us from almost any angle.
Sure.
There's times that you'll run into a team that's strong and powerful, able to control themselves. And that's easier built when you're in an environment with people. Then again, you're going to run into sometimes where you'll run into people that are more individualistic.
Sure.
And so now when you're trying to bring them together on a virtual basis, and IT is known for having people who are very individualistic, they're very task driven.
Yes.
How do you bring that out? How do you bring that out of people?
I think that it goes back to one level of from a leadership perspective. I think it goes back to pre-COVID. What was your relationship with your team in the first place?
Right.
I think that has a lot to do with it. If you were a successful team pre-COVID, you were delivering value to your customers. If you're a shoddy team, however, you just inherited more, or you just brought about more shoddiness in your effort. Now,
so working remotely is almost amplified either
correct.
The positive or the negative, either way.
Exactly. In my opinion, I think it amplifies what your condition was pre-COVID. And I say that due to the fact that in most cases, hiring had already been, in many cases, shut down already. So the teams that are remote were probably the same teams that you had pre-COVID. Okay.
Right.
Everyone's trying to hang on to their jobs right now. Okay.
That's true.
So with that said, Greg, I think that it brings about a new set of skills for the manager, for the leaders, for leadership. We call them leadership skills. I think this whole COVID thing has brought about a new set of requirements as far as really understanding who you are as a leader. Two different skill sets: being able to manage to people who you are looking directly at in the face and are walking the same environment. Now we have a remote workforce. With that remote workforce, then how do you work to ensure that these people are actually doing their jobs? Well, you can utilize performance analytics, most certainly. And then also you make sure that that customer feedback loop that you have, those surveys, are in place and are meaningful and have the right levels of adoption, right? And so between those two feeders, and I could go down a list, and that's mostly not an exhaustive list, but those are the two I would ride with if I were, new leaders in this situation today.
Right. Now, it's interesting. Like I said in the introduction, you and I met several years ago at at an HDI conference.
Yes.
We were both speaking on a panel at that conference. And I had assumed that you had been in the information technology world pretty much your entire life. Before we got on air today, I learned that you have an active background in the film and television production side.
Yes.
So tell me about that a little bit and what you learned back in that environment briefly, and how that's helped you build into the IT, because IT being a second profession for you.
Yeah. Back in those days, I always knew I wanted to be behind the lens of a camera. That was something very young, and I aspired toward it, and got very successful with it, thankfully. So I've worked shows such as I've done contributing pieces to Inside Edition, 60 Minutes. Worked 6 or 7 different major motion pictures, music videos, things along those lines. What was interesting in all of that, and the teamwork aspect. I remember at one point I was working for Procter & Gamble Productions, and my boss walked into the office and he said, "By the way, you know about this project is going to be yours." And I said, "What do you mean it's going to be mine?" He goes, "You are directing it." It's like, oh, okay. Didn't realize that. So all in all, end of the day, the crew turned out to be around 72 people. Okay. Now out of that, I've got about 12 department heads. When I say department heads, the camera, the cinematographer, that department head takes care of everything related to the cameras. First assistant, second assistant, third assistant cameras. You've got the sound, you've got the lighting, you've got the grips, you've got everything. And so,
always wanted to know, what is a grip?
A grip is and I hope no one in the industry is going to kill me for saying this. A grip is all around. A grip is a guy who does everything, and probably one of the most valued members of the crew.
Okay. I just never knew what a grip was. I'm one of those people who will sit and read the credits at every movie and things like that. Yeah. And I just never knew what a grip was. So thank you.
Yeah. And so with that said, what I had to learn how to do in that situation was how to bring together a team of people, in some cases, that had never met before, did not know how the synergy from one department to another was going to play. Now, the good thing is most of the experienced lighting designers, camera people, sound, all of these things, they have a certain expectation in their minds of how things should go. And they set those expectations the moment they walk on the set. It's a high level of quality. They feel that in their minds, they don't want to be the one that's pointed out for failure. So in the film industry, the teams come together very quickly. They disperse very quickly, and then they go to another team and do the same thing all over again. It's a very interesting dynamic across the board. But it works very well.
And while it may be one project, there's different teams that are doing different aspects of each project.
Correct. And
Yeah.
so, as I mentioned, the logistics alone of setting up a particular area, along with, I'd say probably one of the largest efforts is the lighting, and making sure if you're doing a day scene, a night scene, a day for night scene, night for day scene, whatever it is, my team was so good. You'd run into certain problems, and one of the things that we would do in problem solving is my department heads would gather around me,
Right.
okay? And they would say, Rick, this is the problem statement, but here's what we're thinking we'd like to do to solve it. We just need your approval. Okay, recommendations. They give me the recommendations, and you guys think this will work? Yeah, we feel strongly that it'll work. Go for it. This is a great team dynamic, and it worked very well.
And the interesting part of what you brought up is the fact that you might rock on set with somebody at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you got to get that team all the way totally functioning by 9 o'clock in the morning as they start to roll.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're definitely on a schedule. You're on a production schedule that calls for various elements, just like it does in IT. Our production schedules could be based on season. It could be based on time of day. It could be dependent upon position of the sun for certain lighting conditions. It could be based on local laws, things like that. So there were a lot of things that came into play that made up that schedule, and you had to meet that. Now, not saying there are days where it all went right. It didn't. But but that's the idea behind it. In IT, we have to work to understand that from a process, procedural, supporting technology, and really work hard with organizational change. Those are the new items that have really come to bear within, I'd say, the last 1.5 to 2 years.
Wow. Things are changing. I think they're going to change even more quickly down the line.
Yes, they are.
Now, I want to address another area of your life that I didn't necessarily know until today, and that was you served in our United States military with the United States Army. I want to say, first off, thank you for your service. It's greatly appreciative. While I've never served on the active lines, I have a great deal of respect for anyone who has. So thank you very much for your service. And listeners here to the Teamwork Advantage have probably heard several other military personnel that I've had the privilege to interview. But I want to go down a little different path here. Where did you do your basic training?
Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Probably, wintertime, so it's probably nice and comfortable down there for you then?
It was, we began in February when it was nice and cold, then it progressed to the heat.
And do you remember the name of your primary drill instructor?
Drill Sergeant Ziser. Yes.
Drill Sergeant Ziser. So here's the question. What did you think of Drill Sergeant Ziser about the third day of your basic training?
I hated his guts. I hated his guts.
And why is that?
Well, one of the things that the military does, and you all know this more than likely, so one of the things that the military does is it takes away the individuality in order to build a team.
Right.
What your thoughts and perspectives are on the way you think that things should run. They want things to run the way they want them to. Now, the military, what's interesting about the military is you train so much on the same thing to where it becomes reflex.
Yeah.
In a situation where you might normally panic, you might panic, but your approach to that panic is going to be in the way they trained you. Your hands are going to move, your eyes are going to move, you're going to do everything the way that it was trained because you have trained on this thing ad nauseum. So yeah, that was I thought that was the interesting aspect of it.
So Drill Sergeant Ziser, you couldn't stand him. You hated his guts on the third day. So what did you think of that same drill sergeant at the end of basic training?
We were the best of friends. We were on the same page.
Hmm.
He had developed me, given me a level of discipline to think things through before I execute on them. Where as a young man, your first thought is to execute first, think later.
Hmm.
Um, I think that Drill Sergeant Ziser actually brought about not only the discipline, but the know-how and the wherewithal to conquer problems as they arise or would arise in my life, and being able to do better problem solving. And that most certainly has impacted me to this day.
Right. It's interesting because I have asked that question of military personnel all over the United States, and the responses are the same. And we didn't preface this, we didn't practice this in advance. You had no idea I was going to ask these questions. But I had a Marine one time in my program. I said, what'd you think of your DI on the third day of basic training? And he basically said, in a very casual, sitting back, I want to shoot the SOB. Then I said, what did you think at graduation? I'm sorry, say that again?
I was trying to keep it clean for you.
Then I asked him, what did you think at graduation? In a class of about 40 people, we're doing an all-day training. That gentleman stood up, came to full attention in the room. He double tapped his heart and he said, mano a mano, brother to brother, I would take a bullet for Staff Sergeant Vasquez today, sir. And it's been over 25 years since I've seen him.
Yeah, yeah, that's about right.
And that's key, because now that's leadership. Okay, you're taking something and you're molding it and you're building the team all the way through. And that's kind of what you've talked about in your aspects with information technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you've talked about with the film.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of all comes back to what you did in the military.
I was in the President's Honor Guard Unit, 3rd Infantry in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And we did everything ranging from the typical White House dinners to funerals, et cetera, et cetera. My role in that, I did some ceremonial, but I actually enjoyed more of the tactical, logistical aspect of my career at that time. So my job was to provide everything logistically that the U.S. Army drill team needed. I made sure from a supply aspect that the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier units had what they needed. We housed probably some of the most beautiful flags in our unit that I've ever seen. That
Mm-hmm.
Each one of the flags that we utilize in our unit are hand stitched and just made for some beautiful material and all of that. So those things, when I look at the historical value of the work that I did day to day, it really makes me proud.
Good. Well, and you should be proud. It's a privilege to serve in any capacity, and the way that you were able to do it is just awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
I tell anybody, if they get the opportunity, if they're visiting Washington, D.C., is they need to take the time.
Absolutely.
Of course, COVID right now is not there and not able, but go up to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
The changing of the guard.
And watch the changing of the guard.
Yes.
Several years ago, the area was struck by Hurricane Isabel, 2003.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Congress actually gave permission to the guard to stand down during that storm.
Correct.
And they've done that with several snowstorms and blizzards.
It becomes a safety issue at that point.
And they don't stand down.
Yeah, understand. But other than that, you never stand down.
Right. And they didn't stand down then.
No,
they stood there. They stood there and they walked. They had somebody come out and shovel the walkway every 5 minutes for them, making sure the walkway was clear. Mm-hmm. And they never stood down.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's precision and teamwork.
It's a precision and teamwork thing, and these guys have a level of discipline and a level of detail. You're talking measuring each and every individual position of every badge, and everything you see on the front. On the front of them is carefully measured and carefully placed, and everything has a specific purpose. There's no ambiguity here whatsoever.
And I think we can learn from that in our everyday lives of personal life, professional life, regardless of what we're doing, because we have to come together as a team, and there's a reason behind that.
Mm-hmm. There's also that thing I think I learned while I was in there as well. It was life changing for me as a young man in my early 20s, where my level of attention to detail changed. I used to just, like most young men, I would not pay attention to, to detail
Hmm.
in the things that I did. So I would try to work to accomplish what I was told to accomplish, but I'd do a shoddy job at it, or
Right.
it wouldn't be at the level of quality that I knew I could do. I just want to get through it so I could move on to the next big thing, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So it most certainly changed that for me in my life.
Right. And I think that that's critical that we all learn that along the way as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring this full circle. Let's go back to information technology a little bit. And you said
Yeah,
something early on that it's important for the IT department to align itself with business.
sure.
In light of everything that's going on today, taking from what you've learned from the military, what you've garnered within your time in film production,
Mm-hmm.
and everything in that direction all the way through, and again, especially right now with COVID, how can IT, but in general, any team, what are some steps leaders can do with their teams to really get them to align more with the general business model of their organization?
Well, I think that starts at the top, Greg. I think strategically, um, your CIOs, your IT directors, et cetera, have to
Hmm.
set the tone first. In working with many of these organizations, I have to quite often help the strategic leadership actually set in motion what is it you want to accomplish.
Hmm. Kind of like what Staff Sergeant Ziser did.
Exactly, exactly. What is it you want to accomplish? Now, let's set a plan in motion to accomplish this. Let's think about, from a strategic perspective, your overall service portfolio. What is it you want to deliver to your customers? Is it in line with what the business needs?
Hmm.
Is everything you're going to set in motion, does it help actually maintain the tempo of business? When you talk about alignment, you talk about tempo of business. If IT is too slow for tempo of business, IT is then seen as a detriment rather than an asset. Hence, you get outsourced. Okay.
Okay.
Now, let's keep going. So now we know and understand what we want. Now let's go to the tactical level. The tactical level management is where I'm actually managing the employees. This is where I'm getting the employees to do those things that overall support the strategy that was set in motion by senior management. Now, we're working with our team leaders. We're working with our supervisors. We're working with all of these various cogs and elements that need, one, they need clear-cut job descriptions. They need to
Hmm.
understand what they're brought there first to do. Number two, I need to know how much of am I being measured against? What does that look like? Okay, what are my own performance analytics going to be? Thirdly, although down the ladder, compensation is key to that as well.
Hmm.
Okay, they've got to take care of their families and their whatever's going on in their lives.
Hmm.
Fourth, you've got to provide them with the tools that they need to actually do the job effectively and efficiently. Okay. Now, once again, not an exhaustive list, but at a high level, those are some of the key things that is needed in order to right now really affect your remote workforce.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to stop there because I could
Hmm.
keep going for a while.
I could gather that. I know we're tight a little bit on time here, and I'd like to keep the podcast to about 30 to 35 minutes.
Sure.
I'd like to have you back again sometime. We can talk a little
I
bit
would
more
love
in
to come back.
detail.
Absolutely. This is a great forum and I love working with you.
Yeah, it's a privilege. I mean, I enjoy chatting with you, and you and I could talk all day about everything. Um, but folks, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a privilege. Ric Mims, currently he is working with the ServiceNow practice director for the Precision Task Group, headquartered in Houston. He's also, of course, worked with great companies like BP America and Shell Oil as transition managers. You get a chance to ever hear Ric speak, be sure to go there. Remember, this podcast is all about teamwork, leadership, and culture. As I always say, do not have a good day, because having a good day is being average. And if you're on this podcast, and Rick, you're not average. So go make it a great day. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, make it a great day.
You've been listening to the Teamwork Advantage with Greg Gregory. Be sure to like, subscribe, and activate the bell icon to be notified of future episodes. To learn more about how Greg can help your organization develop a powerful winning culture, visit TeamsRock.com. That's TeamsRock.com.